All right, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the world you may be, to session 3 of Youth Advocacy Training for Ocean and Climate Action. Super excited for the conversation we have today for event planning and fundraising. Now, as per usual, as we're waiting for more folks to join us, go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know your name, how old you are, where you're from, and then our icebreaker question today is, what is one thing that brought you joy this week? It's pretty simple, but there's a lot of nasty stuff that's going on in the world right now, and I want to focus in on the good stuff. So we'll get started in just a second, let you guys introduce yourselves, and then we'll jump right into the discussion. All right, we have Jonah, 14, from Arkansas. And Jonah felt joy when they can make their baby sister smile. That is very sweet. I'm sure you're a very good older sibling. We have Haley, 16, from Illinois. Something that brought joy was acing all of their tests. Good job, Haley. Addie, 17, also from Illinois, going out with their grandpa. That's awesome. A lot from Illinois and Arkansas. It's cool that you guys are in a more ocean focused program. Obviously, in session 1, we talked about the ocean climate connection and how things overlap, but it's cool to see so many landlocked folks joining us. We have Trinidad and Tobago, New York City, Texas. That's awesome. Pakistan, the Philippines. Awesome. I'm so glad that you guys have had like little moments of joy this week. It's awesome to see. So go ahead, keep introducing yourselves in the chat. We will move through to the agenda. As per usual, as you guys probably know at this point, we will have all of the recordings for all sessions up on the YouTube channel. If you missed session 1 and session 2, they're already up there, and session 3 will probably be up either Monday or Tuesday. Now, running through the agenda, I'm going to introduce our panelists and we'll have our discussion, and then we will have time for a Q&A at the end. As we move through the discussion, if you have any questions, you come up with anything seems interesting you want to learn more about, you can go ahead and use the chat or the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we will hopefully get to as many questions at the end as possible. And then we have a couple of announcements. Okay, and with that, I am introducing our speaker for today. So we have Nico Gardner-Cerna, who is a labor and community organizer based in LA. They work with the Sunrise Movement in Los Angeles and is taking on corporate polluters, currently leading efforts to clean up toxic oil wells across Los Angeles. So I'm super excited to speak with Nico today, and I think we're going to have a good discussion. So Nico, I'll pass it off to you so you can introduce yourself.
For sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicholas, but y'all can call me Nico. I am from Los Angeles here, actually right by the ocean in San Pedro. Just a little bit about me. I am a labor and community organizer by trade. I have worked, currently, I work as a political organizer for a labor union here in Los Angeles, as well as helping lead the climate organization, the Sunrise Movement. A lot of the work I've done in the past has been around political campaigns, almost at every level of government, and also a variety of advocacy campaigns as well. Super excited to be able to talk to y'all today. I remember, I got my start as an organizer by attending programs like this one, by engaging in youth organizing and youth advocacy, and I grew up right by the ocean, so this feels really special to me. So appreciate, the Ocean Project for inviting me and excited to talk to you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited to hear more about your expertise. So, our first section here, session 4 is more community organizing, and we'll get more into that next week. But starting off, cultivating a movement. Events are kind of a part of that, and they are kind of a tool that we can use to create a movement. So This first question here is, how can event planning as a tool be leveraged to drive action and long-term engagement? And then also, how can events play a role in shifting narratives and building that kind of collective power that we need to make the differences that we're looking for?
For sure. So I'll just start off the top. I'm a Gemini, so I can talk. So f please feel free to move me along.
I'm also a Gemini, so this is
Oh,
the blind here. It's okay.
everyone's ready for us to yap. So I think a few things up top. I do want to emphasize that, political events, advocacy events, whether it's a protest or a fundraiser or whatever you call it, there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of power in, saying the right thing at the right time with the right strategy. So I want, like, this, a lesson that we have to take this kind of stuff very seriously. So the very first thing I would kind of highlight when trying to situate an event or a protest or an action to be effective is that it's all about why you're doing it. Form follows function. Before you plan any event, you will make it 1,000 times more strategic if you are very clear about your strategy, right? Why do you want to accomplish it? Or what do you want to accomplish? Be very clear about what you want to accomplish, how you are going to accomplish it, and what are the steps you need to take in order to have a successful event. Because you want to have an event, an action, protest, whatever that has relevancy. That that people, this is something that people are talking about, and you're saying kind of the right thing to cut through a really heavy media environment. Social media is so chaotic, it's hard to break through. So approaching it with a lot of intention, being very clear about your strategy and what you want to accomplish is key to a successful event. So, for example, if you are trying to get a piece of legislation passed, plan an event that is kind of connected to the political landscape of a city. So, for example, what council members are voting against this or what legislators are voting against this. My event should be geared towards moving them or moving a different audience to put pressure on them. So it's all about kind of intentionality. And I think, what is also very powerful about event planning and about having these big events is that it's an opportunity to kind of flex your leadership skills, and it's an opportunity to bring people into your movement, into your organization. And that's how you start shifting narratives and you build collective power, is because you are welcoming new people into your space, into your movement, into your organization. And that's really exciting, because they bring resources and energy and power. But also for the individuals who are already in the organization, this is an opportunity to learn, to grow together, to struggle, and you will be better at this the next time. So that's the power of event planning, right? So transitioning a little bit to how events play roles in shifting narratives, I think we have to understand, it's very, very key that your event is at least situated or relevant to how the media and social media is working. So, I talked about how relevancy is very important. I also talked about how being authentic is really important. So, I mean, everyone here is young, so you understand that what we crave the most is an authentic event, an authentic story, something that there's heart and soul into it. So lean into those stories because it helps you break through. And you just have to kind of keep going, be connected to the media, make sure that you're telling those stories in as many places as possible, and be very strategic about where you're telling those stories and where your event is being highlighted, right? Depending on what you're trying to do, you might not get big media outlets to come out, but if you get the right ones or the right influencers or the right people in the room, there's a lot of power in that. So sorry, I've been rambling for a little bit as promised, but it's about
No,
strategy, attention.
I think that really covers it really well. And so session two last week also was about social media, and we talked a lot about, the practicalities of knowing your audience going into formulating a social media campaign. So knowing that kind of idea and that context is applicable for event planning on kind of a larger scale than just social media is really, really helpful. So we'll talk a little bit more about like the before, during, and after components of planning event in a little bit. But this next question, when we have an event, even if it's just like a once off thing and it's just one day, it's not an annual event, it's just one thing, you don't want people to show up, be there, experience the event, and forget about it. You don't want that. You want them to remember their time there. That you generally want them to learn something and take something away from the experience. So beyond just the event itself, how can you kind of harness the experience of being there in person and generate that into long-term advocacy of your event participants and then create that sustained momentum that we're looking for?
For sure. So, very relevant to media environments and social media, knowing your audience. Planning an event and running an event is basically an exercise in storytelling. It's about what story are you telling to the folks who are there? What story are you telling to the people who are reading about the event afterwards or who are seeing it on social media? And I feel very grounded in kind of that Maya Angelou quote about people aren't going to remember exactly what you said, but how you made them feel. So really kind of lean into the authenticity and the emotional aspect of the stories you're telling. That really brings it, at a very practical level, makes people feel connected to what you're trying to accomplish at your event. But, when it comes to how do you sustain advocacy, how do you sustain a community, one thing that as you plan, that I will always emphasize is have a very clear vision for what you are trying to bring people into as a result of the event. And context is king, right? It really just depends on the type of organization that is throwing the event, or if it's less formal, more formal. So, for example, my experience is in community-based organizations, in political campaigns, so we know that what we want from people after is to sign up for the next event or to commit to coming to the next canvas. So based on that, we know exactly that we have to have a really clear plan for how to reach back out to them, how to build rapport, how to kind of incentivize participation. These a lot of camp in a campaign, everyone's a volunteer. So, how do you get people to come out for free? So we have a very clear vision of what we need from them, and we have a clear vision for how we get them there. So for example, if you're just doing this is more applicable to organizing based events, protests, actions, whatever. One of the key tactics, a very practical thing to do is to do list work after your event. So for example, and actually, it applies to a lot of different things. So for example, go through the list, call every single person, assuming that there's the resources and the capacity for that. But call people, build those relationships, become memorable, and that's how people feel like warm and fuzzy about your event, is that they had a good time. The stories told there were really powerful. Someone followed up afterwards. So do that list work, build those relationships. Yeah, it's not just the event in isolation. So much has to go into it before and after.
Yeah, definitely. If you guys will remember, I think I spoke a little bit about this on social media last weekend. Um, Start with your goal and then work backwards from there. Build out, the digestible chunks, make it easier for yourself. Start with a goal, work backwards. Makes it way, way, way easier. Now this cultivating the movement section is kind of broad and nebulous, so to speak, because we're talking about a lot of theory stuff when it comes to why events are important. But let's move into what it actually takes to put an event together. So most of us here are young people. I'm 27. A lot of you guys are still in middle school and high school, but I'm sometimes twice as old as some of you guys, and I still don't even really know what I'm doing sometimes when it comes to an event, and I don't want all of that weight on my shoulders. So to make sure your event is successful, you want to build a team. You want to surround yourself with people who actually do know what they're doing and who actually do have the specific expertise that you're looking for to make sure that your event is a success. So as some of you may know, if you've had like group projects in school, sometimes there are moments where there's like a little bit of contention and tension between team members. So, when we're talking about doing an event that's for a community based on a specific issue, sometimes people are going to come at that issue a little bit differently. And they're going to have different beliefs and they're going to have like ideas on how things might work better one way or the other. So, how do you make sure when you're building your team, despite differences in opinion, whatever, how do you make sure that the goal, like the reason and purpose that you're doing the event, resonates not just with your team, but also with the broader community?
Yeah, I mean, I think panels like this are fun because it makes it look like I have all of the answers. But the truth is that, I've been doing this for I started when I was in college, so it's been about 7 years. I'm 26. And I still feel like I'm learning and I don't have all the answers, which is why having a team that you trust and a wider network is so important. So, when it comes to, so just to clarify, the question is, specifically how to build out a team or how to kind of build out an event that resonates.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to building out an event that resonates, and this is applicable, whether it's a fundraiser, petition drive, blood drive, whatever, whatever is relevant to the moment, being grounded in the community in which you are doing it and in the movement in which you are doing it is very important for a variety of reasons. First, a lot of the success of organizations and of events is based on relationships. Uh, because no man is an island. No one can do it alone. These relationships are essential for knowledge, for resources, for you name it. So it's important to preserve those relationships, but being connected to community and having, kind of a real boots on the ground feel will tell you whether your event resonates, whether it's something people are talking about. Maybe your strategy is to raise awareness for something that people aren't already talking about, and that's cool. That's something that you should, if that's the purpose, like execute. But if you're trying to be, have something that already resonates with people, then it's important to be able to talk to folks in the community to have a good understanding of, what is relevant, what matters to people, what's going to connect with people, because that's always just a lot easier. And then, bringing people to your team who you trust, who will tell you, won't just say yes to whatever you do, right? Will tell you exactly what the truth is, will fight for what they believe in, will connect you to wider networks. So that's kind of how you ensure that the team you're building and the event you're building is relevant, is just make sure it's connected to the community it comes from, whatever space you're trying to organize, and trust those people to tell you the truth and trust them to do a good job.
Absolutely. And I think that that really does cover kind of part of the second question here, which is what role do these types of partnerships that you're talking about and collaborations with community stakeholders, whether that's, libraries, schools, small businesses, whatever you want to partner with for your event. How do these partnerships help in amplifying the impact that you're trying to make and securing funding? That's very much what you're talking about, is when you're on the ground, you're connected, you have members of these stakeholder groups on your team that can really help kind of centralize your message. So I think you've covered this pretty well, but I do want to focus in on the second part of this question here, which, as a young person, for our audience today, how can they actually go about starting to build these partnerships? How do they go and like find the community stakeholders that they're looking for?
For sure. I mean, right off the top, what I would say is that, as young people, I'm going to include as fellow kids, there's sometimes a sense of like, oh, well, I'm just 16, I'm just 27. Like, what do I know? I'm not in a position to hold these relationships. Get that out of your head. You're on a mission. You're here to accomplish something. Like you are just as serious as everyone else on the table, and feel every freedom to start building those relationships. The best way, whether it's in organizing spaces, whatever, is we vote with our feet. Like the way that you go out and build those relationships is by getting involved. So, for example, I joined Sunrise and eventually kind of like became a leader in this organization because I showed up to an event, because I reached out. I started just meeting and talking people and being very wanting to kind of build out those relationships. So that's it's very. I wish there was a more sophisticated answer, but it's really just you got to go to these events. You got to start talking to people. You have to like do the work, and that's how you start getting to know people. And most importantly, people start trusting you because they know that you're willing to do the work.
Very much so. And I would also kind of call back to our conversation last Saturday with Annalise, for you guys who were on that session, talking about, the use of hashtags. And, if your event is, hashtag youth ocean climate action, you can go and that's how you can find these types of events as well. But also utilizing things like I said, libraries, schools, those kinds of things. They all have these networks and calendars and event boards that you can go and look at to figure out where you need to be and when. And I think that's a really, really good point, Nico. I think, you know, there's always the first step to take is figuring out what's already out there. And it can be kind of daunting and intimidating, but that really is the first step. So yeah, okay. Moving on to, again, we've talked about building a team, now actually creating the event itself. What does that mean? How do we figure that out? We've talked about we need a goal, we need to know what our audience is, and we need the team around us. But after that, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about venue? Are we talking about catering? Are we talking about, what are the things that we need to be considering when we're putting a community event together?
For sure. So, I mean, first, just take a deep breath. That's always like a good first step because you'll be sitting somewhere and you're like, oh my God, I have to call a bunch of caterers and I don't have time. And that's going to be okay. We're going to take a deep breath. So the very first step is, kind of, I mean, honestly, the very first step, these are two concurrent first steps is, do that planning process. Who is your audience? What are you trying to accomplish? How are you going to get there? And what are the steps you're going to take to accomplish these things? So that's, strategy, goals, tactics, something that in an ideal world would happen at the same time, but we shouldn't feel too much pressure to live in an ideal world, is you're going to build out your team. So maybe it's just you and you're starting, and this event is your brainchild, and you have the ability to bring people in. That's a very unique situation. It's a special gift, right? Because then you have a sense of your strengths, your weaknesses, what you want to accomplish, and you can build a team around, I know I need someone that can do math. I can't do math. That's my experience. So we get someone who's good with money. You can kind of be very selective. But usually it's, you're already working within the context of an organization or a club or something, and you already have, personalities in the room. So build out that team, if you have any influence on it, make sure it's people that you trust to do the job, people that are knowledgeable, and are willing to work together in a team, and people that believe in what you're trying to accomplish, right? And I think it sounds very simple, it feels very kind of cliche, but when building out a team, and this is a callback to the last slide, I'm sorry, you know, it's very easy to find a bunch of people that are just going to agree with everything you say or are not going to put a lot of thought into something because they just want to find consensus. No, no, find people that are going to challenge you. Find people that are willing to, again, fight for their idea because it's through, I don't want to say conflict is a charged word. Like it's through that debate, it's through that kind of conflict that you can work, that ideas become better. So once you have out you have, what you're going to do, you have your team, you know what you have to accomplish. The very next thing is build out the structure to accomplish it. So for example, if you're building out a coalition, there's different organizations working together on the same event, and you have to do a press conference, be very clear that this is how we're going to make decisions. This is who gets to make those decisions, you always have to be communicating with one another. That's find a time, you're going to end up meeting constantly, and that's how it should feel, is that it's a never-ending meeting. And then you delegate, you stay organized. But usually the very first steps depend on the event. I usually like to start with the biggest worsts. So, for example, if I'm doing a press conference, I know what I'm going to need the absolute most is people to speak at it. So I'm going to go find the speakers. And then, I start moving down the list of like how important is it to the success of the event. Oh, so now I have speakers. Now I need a podium. Now I need people to show up to the event. So that's how I approach it. But Grant, I bring a chaotic flair to my event planning, so maybe you don't want to do exactly as I do.
A little bit of chaos never hurt anybody. I think event planning is generally chaotic anyway. So, that might be a good thing. But I think, to your point, Nico, you did talk about the leadership skills and delegation, of, who knows better than you at what, like if I'm doing a press conference, I don't want to be the one to speak. Like I'm going to find somebody else to do that, but we still need to make sure that our messaging is streamlined. So I'm still going to work with that person. They're just going to be the like talking head. So I think that leads us really well into this next question, which is if you do have any advice for assembling a team with those complementary skills, how do you balance the leadership versus collaboration? Like to make sure that the group is strong together, because it can be kind of strange, when you're a young person starting out in a directorship, leadership type of role for the first time. The idea of like telling people what to do, can feel very foreign, and you don't want to like boss people around and be rude about it, obviously. But sometimes finding that balance is a little bit tricky when it's your first time in that, again, leadership role. So what kind of like leadership skills do you have? Um, what advice do you have rather on those kinds of leadership skills?
For sure. So I mean, I think two rules up top. First, be honest with yourself. Like, be honest about what your skills are, what you want to accomplish, and realistically how much time you have. I think, and then create a team and delegate accordingly because I think as leaders, we want to have eyes on everything, do everything. And a key part of leadership is letting go and being honest about what you as an individual can accomplish and like the best use of your time. And the second, and this is especially, relevant to us as all of us here as youth organizers, is be confident. You earn your place at that table. So, the way you kind of balance leadership with, the tension between, there's always a power dynamic. So there's a tension between, how much collaboration versus just how much of it is just, I will articulate a vision and we go for it. I think given the time, and I alluded to a little bit earlier is when you build out the structures, as you kind of talk about how exactly you're going to make decisions, it is very helpful to have a conversation about how, basically how you're going to make those decisions, who gets to basically like be very clear about what everyone's roles are and just like what is people responsible for, what are their areas of influence. And if you're the one leading, ask folks, what do you want my role to be? Be very clear about what your role as a leader is and have those conversations early so that everyone has a really good understanding of, okay, I know I'm the finance person, so I don't have to care about the social media strategy. And then if I'm the leader of the group, I know what everyone's going to do, and I know what they expect of me. So being very, it's almost being very vulnerable, right? About, what do you expect of me as a leader? How can I be there for you? I think a lot of leadership is just being really communicative and being there for your team. They have to know that you're willing to go to bat for them and that you trust them. So it's about communication. It's about investing in those relationships and investing in the success of the team. And I think especially if you're planning an event, there's going to be a little bit of chaos. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be disagreements. Lean into it, right? I actually think that a well-managed conflict results in a better idea because it's an exchange of as long as everyone's like nice and respectful about it, but lean into the chaos, lean into the conflict, be there in the dirt with your team, because you'll come up with like a better idea and you will like make friends along the way.
Very much so. I think that it again, it can be very daunting for a young person to be coming into these kinds of leadership roles for the first time, and it can be daunting to even hear about, potential conflict that might happen down the road. But I think that, the one thing to remember is, you know, the purpose. Why are we all here? We're all here for the same reason. You like you're a team of volunteers or your team of staff, if that's how it works. You're all here for a reason, and usually it's because you want the people who are attending your event to get something out of it, to learn, to be called to action, and then to leave your event and go take action in whatever way that looks like for them. And so when you can come back and you do have that, that why, that purpose that we talked about earlier, and everybody is clear on what that is, it might look ever so slightly different between people. When you really have that foundation, you're gold. I don't think you have much to worry about at all. But to your point, Nico, I think, that is really, really good leadership advice. And as a leader, asking your team, how can I be there for you is incredibly underrated and incredibly important. And I think that that is something that people in leadership roles, unfortunately, do not learn early enough in their leadership role. So take that to heart, you guys. Remember to keep yourself humble when you're put into a position of relative power within a group. Make sure you're, consulting and getting a consensus from the people around you and making sure that you're all working together to move forward.
If I could
So,
add to
oh yeah, go ahead. Oh my gosh, go ahead.
I was a YMCA kid, and like a concept that we're always taught is, like servant leadership. To your point, it's like incredibly underrated to just ask, how can I be there for you? And how can I, like what do you need? Like how can I, what do you need me for? And I think as a leader, a big part of what you're going to need to do is just keep everyone's eye on the prize and on the ultimate goal. Because everyone's going to be so into the weeds, you're going to be the only one that has the complete picture. And that feels really intimidating, but you got this, don't worry. And just as long as you're communicating and asking what people need, you'll be fine. It's gonna be fine. Everyone's trying their best. It's just a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love hearing that you were a YMCA. I was a little bit of a Y kid also when I was younger. I was a Girl Scout. My brother was a Boy Scout. And I'm sure that, a lot of our audience who are watching today, a lot of you guys are probably also in some sort of leadership program. So when you're looking for, what makes a good leader, think about some of the programs that you've been a part of that you've had a really, really good time and that you've learned a lot from. And then think about what was so special about the people who were leading the charge in that program, and you'll usually find that common thread of them asking you about your thoughts and how you feel. So I definitely think that that's really, really important, and I'm glad that we're talking about it here. Now, the budgeting stuff. I think the fundraising and financial side of things, at least for me, but I also know that this is the same for a lot of people, can be one of the most intimidating parts of um, doing an event, but also, doing campaign organizing in general, working in the nonprofit world. Everybody's always looking for grants and different types of funding, and it can be very stressful, especially again for a young person who's never done this before. So, you want to be strategic. You want to make sure that you're going to the right places. You're not exhausting efforts where it's not necessary to. But you know, grassroots organizing is kind of intrinsically, you got to be creative somehow with your fundraising. So when you do have those limited resources, Nico, how have you been able to kind of figure out ways to creatively budget while still prioritizing the things that you need to?
Yes, this is my area expertise. I've planned many events with like $25 and a dream. So when it comes to, working with limited resources, it is underrated, and you'd think that everyone does this, but make a budget. Know exactly how much money you have and be very militant even about keeping track of expenses, knowing exactly how much money you have to spend and how much you're spending. You'd be amazed at how many people get tripped up because they just don't know how much money is in their orbit. I think when it comes to allocating resources, prioritize what is absolutely essential. So, for example, we're going to use the press conference metaphor. Keep it going. So, if you know that at the absolute least, you're going to need speaker systems, podium, uh, signs, make sure that you have the money for that. But, sometimes we don't have, thousands of dollars lying around. Actually, very rarely do we have thousands of dollars lying around. So don't be afraid to ask for what you need and give in return. A lot of community organizing is calling your friend and saying, "Hey, I know you have a speaker. Can I borrow it?" Like y let go of your sense of shame. That's like a key tactic here. Don't be afraid to ask. Be creative. If you know that you have a Bluetooth speaker and a microphone, run with it. Just do what you got to do, and be very good about staying on top of how much money you have and how much you're spending, and ask for help and be creative.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of leaning on your community, I think, is a really hot topic right now, especially with, social media and all of the posts that I've seen shared in the last 6 or 7 weeks since a very particular event in the United States history. And we have talked a lot about community care and what it means to, lean on your neighbors. And I think that that's a really good example of like, if you know a friend who, I don't know, their family has like a catering business, you can ask them like, hey buddy, like I don't know if this is possible, but like the worst that they can say is no, and the best thing that they can say is yes. So and there's a huge spectrum of answers in between there. Maybe they can't supply the food, but they can supply tables. You never know. It's always best case scenario is obviously ideal, but there's always going to be, different ways that you can get what you need without having to spend your entire budget on something that you might not have to.
And
So,
you how excited people are to help you. I people want to. I've done so many different actions or events where folks will open up their homes so that we could use the restroom, that will lend out speaker systems. People want to help. Your community is there for you, and because you've put time into it, right? So, it's not just like, ugh, I have to go ask for a speaker. You get to ask your friend for a speaker because you know that you have that relationship.
yeah, no, that's a really good way of framing it because there can be like weird little inklings of guilt in there too when you're asking for something. You're like, please. But no, it is like an honor to know somebody who might want to help you. So I think that's a really awesome way to frame it. So this next question, how can organizers communicate the value of their event to potential funders when advocating on specific issues? And what I mean by this question is once you've gone through your budget and you have checked off all of the boxes, you've asked all of the people that you know who might already have access to the resources that you're looking for. The next step after that is to kind of go one level above, look at the small businesses around you, look at the different companies who are, operating in your area who might be able to send in a little chunk of money for you. And if you want them to do that, you have to explain where their money is going to go. So, how can a young person go about doing that?
For sure. So I think the most important thing to remember here is that, as organizers of events, we're incredibly passionate about every single area of this event, why it's happening, where it's happening, who's going to be performing, whatever it is. We feel passionate for every single area of, because we're putting this together. Funders and, the small business down the street, whoever you're hitting up for money, just might have different priorities or just care about different things than you do. And I don't say that in a bad way. As people, we just all have different interests, different things that we care about. For example, if you're throwing a comedy night to support a local aquarium, maybe you could be really jazzed about all the money that's going to the aquarium, but the small business owner could be a huge comedy fan. So even though it's supporting parts of the event, it's two different angles. And this, by all way of saying, is when communicating the value of the event, it is not, it's not necessarily about the value of the event to you. It's the value, and this is just, I'm going to be very real and practical here. It's the value of the event of the person you're talking to. So, if you have time, do some research, get to know what this person cares about, and tailor the presentation or tailor the ask to be something that that this is something they're passionate about that they already connect with. So, for example, if for a comedy night example, you're talking to a local philanthropist who loves comedy and maybe doesn't care as much about the ocean, unfortunately, oriented about how this is going to uplift young comedians for a good cause. So it's about knowing your audience, a tie-in from last week, and communicating in a way that would resonate with them. And also at a very practical level, make the ask incredibly clear. Like ask it straight out because I've been in a lot of funding meetings where we think it's going really well and they're going to give us money. And because we don't communicate effectively what we want, we don't get what we expect. So, tailor your presentation, tailor your argument, and be very clear about what you need and what your funder should expect to get in return, whether it's like a physical thing or, just like a value or, a net plus for the world.
Very much so. Very much so. And I think that it can be tricky because sometimes in grassroots organizing, you don't want to have to lean on, quote unquote, playing the game when it isn't really about the purpose of the event, but it's about the stakeholder share or shareholder value and what are they going to get out of it. It's like if you're doing a beach cleanup, you know, obviously if the community is cleaner and like, we have a lot of, like I said earlier, landlocked students today. If you're doing a community cleanup, whether you're close to the ocean or not, your community will still benefit from not having all of this plastic around, and that can, be of intrinsic value, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a specific dollar sign amount for the person that you're asking money from. And that can just be tricky to navigate on its own. But um, yeah, I think we cover that really well. And again, kind of once more moving up another level, once you've gone through and had these more interpersonal connections with these different types of groups and businesses who might be able to give you money outright, then we're also talking about grant writing and that kind of fundraising. So when you're applying for stuff like sponsorships, a lot of you who are in high school will be, applying for scholarships soon. I think a lot of this is kind of applicable there too. You know, how do you actually find the types of grants that will actually fund youth events? Like, do you know of any specific resources that young people can go to, or like, how do you even start to look for that kind of thing?
Of course. So there's a variety of different ways that you can approach the situation. I have a few things coming to mind. First is, I'm sorry, I don't have them off the top of my head, but we're very fortunate now. There's a lot of websites that actually will kind of put together into a list or into a portal a variety of different grants and funding opportunities. And I would say when it comes to, first of all, there's no grant too small. There is no opportunity that you should be left unturned. Consider every single one, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Don't only go for the really big grants that are going to be really popular. Be methodical about going through that list and applying wherever you can. And I think this is also something where the relationships you hold could be very effective because not every grant is on a website somewhere. Sometimes, and for those of you who are applying to college, you might know that sometimes it'll be a family or an individual that will fund a grant or a scholarship, and the only way that you would know about it is if you're connected to that organization or to that family. So leverage both online resources and your personal connections or the connections that you're building. And then just something I'd say off the top is grant writing does not come naturally. Grant writing is actually a skill. So, there are people who make a lot of money just applying to grants. So treat it like a skill that you can develop, just like learning the guitar or I don't know, I guess that's the only thing you could learn, but spend some time, it maybe it's not the most glamorous thing, but it's important. So spend time developing that muscle. It's a good skill for everyone to know, but if you want to pick one person and say, "Hey, you're the grant writer, congratulations," like make sure they learn how to do it because it's a skill. It's something that needs to be learned.
That is very, very good advice. Listen to Nico, everybody. Grant writing is a skill, and I recommend that you develop it. It is so difficult to find funding when you're working at a nonprofit, whether it's a big one or a small one. You're always going to be looking for somebody who can help you write grants if you want job stability.
Oh,
Grant writing.
will always be needed.
Yeah. Um, but of course, with every job comes their downsides. And when you are looking at grants, we have some companies out there who like to cover up some of their, activities by saying, look, we're funding X, Y, and Z to make up for this other stuff that we're doing, right? Like Coca-Cola, obviously the largest producer of plastics in the world, they fund a lot of environmental projects, and a lot of grassroots projects need money. And I hate to say beggars can't be choosers. That is very true in a lot of instances. We do you know want to have these kinds of ethical considerations, and it's a difficult conversation to have. It's very complex. We could spend an entire hour just talking about that. But for a young person, what advice do you have for navigating that kind of greenwashing in fundraising for events?
Hey, listen, we listen and we don't judge, right? I'm not here to tell you what to do. Like you get a green opportunity, you do what you need to do. What I will say, it's not worth it. Uh, I think it is, I very much understand the appeal of because these companies will come in with $25,000, 30, like a lot of money. And you know that we're all basically running the little organizations that could. It would be very, very helpful. I understand the draw, but from a variety of levels, it's just not worth it. First, you're gonna feel awful. It's just not gonna feel good. And it's better to stand by your beliefs and retain your integrity and retain your relationships than to accept huge sums of money for something that you will be used to kind of greenwash, right? It's just, again, do what you need to do, but in my experience, it's just very rarely worth it. So it's complicated. It's really hard to say no. I don't want to sit here and pretend that it's hard to like stick by your beliefs, but it's important to do so because you will remain more effective as an organization, and the people will know that they can trust you. And on top of everything else, this is uh, funding is interesting because it very much applies by the golden rule, which is he who has the gold makes the rules. So, you might be in a situation where they'll say, oh, you can't do this event. You can't do this event because it hurts our brand. So, again, do what you need to do. But that's in my experience, it's just it's hard to do all the things you want to do as a climate-oriented group and take money from organizations that conduct greenwashing.
Yeah.
Might be a little heavy-handed, but well,
No,
friends.
but this is the thing. I think it's important, and to your point earlier about, messaging and knowing your audience, that transparency component is huge here. If you do end up, taking money for a grant for your amazing project that you're really excited about and you need this funding to be able to do the thing that you want to do, again, we're not telling you not to do that. We're not telling you, one way or another, as long as you're being transparent with your audience specifically, that's really all that matters. Because what's going to look worse is if you try to sweep that under the rug and pretend like that's not what's happening here. That's going to get people to trust you even less. So, as Nico said, just do your research, think carefully. And I think that that is a good way to kind of tie up that very complex, very difficult conversation that I know I could talk about for hours.
Um,
Okay, so we've talked a lot about a lot of different components of event planning. We've talked about finding your team. We've talked about, keeping on your goals, all of that thing. What would you say is your best piece of advice for the logistics on the day of? Now, I want to also emphasize here with our audience that when we talk about events, we could be talking about something as simple as, recording an episode of a podcast with your friend. It could be a week-long festival. It could be like a long weekend, beach cleanup and film premiere. It could be a whole range of different things. So whether it's an hour-long event or like multi-day, what would you say is the best way to stay organized throughout that process?
For sure. So, I mean, have a plan. That's the number one most important thing is have a plan. You will probably be working on this for a few weeks. Spend some time talking about how it's helpful to put it together. I was told it's called the TikTok, no relation to the app. It's basically, and this mainly applies if you're doing a larger event. It's basically an hour by hour, minute by minute breakdown of what's supposed to happen when. And that level of detail is very helpful because people know, oh, okay, I'm at 3:04, I'm responsible for X. So that is a very helpful practice. The other thing is that, if you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. Get organized beforehand, or being organized, as I've come to learn, unfortunately, is a practice. I have learned that I cannot keep everything in my head. I had a boss that once told me, because I have a bad memory, he's like, build out a memory made out of paper. So I write everything down. I have like an agenda book. I track projects on legal pads. You don't have to do that. You could use a Google spreadsheet, but put time into staying organized yourself so that the event can stay organized and that you know exactly kind of what goes where. And then, we talked about leaning into the chaos. Something will go wrong. I'm going to be honest with y'all. Something will go wrong. Someone will forget to bring something. The power will, that's so dramatic. The power will not go out. You'll be fine. But, something's going to go wrong. That's okay. It's fine. If it's not important, move on. There's like too much to going on. An important lesson is that the people attending your event don't know what it's supposed to look like until they get there. So they might not know that you were supposed to have blue lights instead of pink lights. Just roll with the punches. Do what you can, and just finish. As long as you finish strong at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really does a good job of covering this next question too, which is how to troubleshoot those types of unexpected things, right? It's all about having your team, making sure people are on the same page so you can have a backup, a plan B, C, D. It's definitely helpful. Now we do only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm gonna say we can skip this next question here, and I do want to pass it over to our audience. So I know that a lot of you guys are really on the younger side. It's super cool to see. Usually our main like medium age for our audience for this program is a little bit older, and you guys are definitely on the younger side. So I'm really interested to see, what your experience is with event planning. So if you guys do have any questions for Nico about anything that we talked about today, if you want to share your experiences, if you are a young person who does have experience in event planning, feel free to share that as well. Go ahead, use the chat, use the Q&A. And then while we are kind of waiting for some questions to come in, Nico, I'll just pass it off to you. Do you have any kind of like final notes, ideas, suggestions, etc.?
No, I mean, I think, I think we covered a lot. So I think if there's one thing you walk away with, other than the really insightful things we have been saying for the last hour, is that, have grace with yourself. So much, a lot of our experience before we step into their shoes, we see leaders, not at the national level, but like leaders in our community, they have their stuff together. It all looks so effortless. Once you get into the other side of the equation, you will see just how chaotic and how like I don't want to say messy, but it's hard. People are just making it look easy. So have grace with yourself. Not everything's going to go right. It's not supposed to. You're going to have conflicts. That's natural. The thing is just, is you just got to keep going. You got to keep swimming. And you're going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Say that as
Yeah,
you can use that as a mantra a lot moving forward. It's going to be okay.
giving yourself grace is a big one. You don't want to have the weight of the world on your shoulders. You have a team to kind of alleviate that for a reason. And I think, yeah, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. Whether this is the first or the 100th event that you've planned, nobody's perfect. But yeah, we do have some questions coming in. We have one from an anonymous attendee in the Q&A. How to come up with unique and effective event ideas. I think that's really interesting. How do you actually, think outside of the box and be creative in the type of event that you want to plan?
For sure. Ooh, this is hard because it feels, as an organizer, I feel like I'm cycling through different events. Again, it bears repeating that context is the most important thing. What are you trying to accomplish? What's the world you're operating in? Knowing kind of the ground rules will be really helpful in planning a creative event. A lot of it is also just based on capacity. As a leader, you have to put aside the time to kind of do that. And I recommend do brainstorming as a team. That kind of collective effort will help. Relying on the collective effort of your team and of the wider community that they bring in is very helpful. Like listen to as many voices as possible. And usually, at a very practical level, what I find most effective is taking a very standard format, press conference, rally, and just adding a twist. And it's very helpful to know that as organizers and advocates, we're standing on the shoulders of a long legacy of organized resistance and advocacy. There's a lot of examples in history and in your community that you can pull from and just make it your own. What is your unique voice and your unique spin that you could bring to this and lean into that and you'll come up with something creative. Like I just did plan an event that was supposed to be a press conference and somehow turned into a stand-up comedy night and it was more successful and it went well, so be open to it.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. That's really, really good advice. And I think also like looking around at other events that have been done that you're planning and that you can look up and see like, oh, if I'm planning a beach cleanup, like literally just Google like creative and interesting beach cleanup. Like you can literally just do that. And it seems like it's like kind of benign and simple, but like it really does help to like see what other people have been doing. I think it's a great question. We also have a question in the chat from Marina that I think is a really good one. When writing proposals, what should we be including? Now, I will say in general, when you're submitting a grant specifically, they will have a given outline of specific questions. But in the context of just like cold emailing somebody, what do you think are the key components to include?
For sure. So, you know how I said that grant writing is a skill? I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because it is not a skill I have. But so, context is key here. I think, if you're cold emailing someone, it is important to have an elevator pitch. It is, this is the basically if you ran into someone in an elevator and you had a minute between floors, what do you need to tell them? And honestly, it is better to just have something to that. put some thought into it. But essentially, you want to tell people who you are, what you stand for, and what you're trying to accomplish. And also, people are really interested in the why. Why are you doing this? Why are you planning this event? Why are you hosting this press conference? So it's the journalistic method, right? Who, what, when, where, and why. You do that, that's how the brain likes to think about things. And something I like to do that is helpful, just to, whether it's an email or in person, give people a preview up front of what they're gonna like, of what the next 30 to 60 seconds are gonna look like, because the brain just picks up on information better that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm writing out something here in the chat that I find to be really helpful when I'm planning something like youth advocacy training, right? POP goals. Some of you may have heard of this. POP, POP, purpose, outcome, process. That is like the main thing that not only you need to like create the event itself, that's really helpful in your planning process, but also it's really helpful to build from when you're going to ask for funding. So I'm going to write that out here. Um, there's another question that's sort of similar to that last one, which is what is a good way to fundraise as a youth group apart from just being resourceful? So I think that might mean like how to host separate events. Like, I don't know, like in high school, we used to do like sports teams would do car washes, or, in middle school, you do a lemonade stand, that kind of thing. So do you have any suggestions on that front?
Yeah, you got to do the bake sale. You got to do the car wash. You have to. There's a lot of power and resources in your community. You don't have to do the fancy gala to get a lot of money. So in the same way that you have to be creative with your event, be creative in the ways that you're fundraising. I like being out in the street and selling stuff. I once saw a group pull off an event by doing a lemonade stand. There's a lot of different ways that you can tap into your community. It's I keep coming to this comedy night thing because, as I've learned very recently, it's actually pretty easy to pull off once you have the comedians. But kind of tap into your community, tap into your resources, host events that people want to come to. A lot of the most successful campaign fundraisers I've ever done is because it's something that people want to come to, and it's a place where they can find community. So, there's a gamut. There, sell the brownies, sell the cookies. It's a good way to make money. On the other end, you could throw events where you can fundraise that are effective because they're rooted in trying to build community, and it's things people want to do. The Bernie campaign was very successful in this. They did kind of like meetups where people just came and built community, and that's how they built out their organization.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. We have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to say this will be the last question that we answer. If you do have any additional questions, my email is on the next slide. Feel free to send me whatever else you want to have answered. But this is specifically for somebody who is planning to host a Students for Zero Waste week at their school. However, activities would be during lunch periods, and I do not have any free periods. What would be the best way to try and recruit volunteers for this that will have similar motivations to helping with this week as I do? That's very tricky, honestly. Working within like very specific boundaries can be kind of frustrating and difficult at times. So, do you have any advice for this student?
I think this is where, relationships are really, really key. No one can do it alone. So whether it's relationships you already have or relationships you want to build, lean on them. I think if you're kind of just starting off from scratch, try to find student groups or organizations or just people that that are already naturally aligned with your cause, right? So, for example, if you want to do zero waste week, and there's a recycling club or a climate justice club or even a political club that is aligned with what you're trying to accomplish, reach out to ask, invite them into this kind of partnership. This is a very common tactic of organizers. It's called list work. You basically put together the people that you need to reach out to, and you just go one by one by one. So build relationships, you leverage those relationships. That's where they're most important, is because they help lighten the load. They bring more people into the organization, and it'll just be more peace of mind, at least at the very end of the day. So, just there's so much value in cold calling, cold emailing, just walking up to, if you're at school, I guess you could just like walk up to them, right? So, ask for help and you will receive.
Yeah, and I'll add that in the age of digital media, we kind of grow up with a cell phone in our hands these days. We have kind of forgotten the value of traditional media, like a bulletin board on the wall in your hallway at school. You can ask whoever, like your guidance counselor, whatever teacher is in charge, like your librarian sometimes, if you can just put up a poster and say, I'm looking for volunteers. This is the event that we're going to be doing. This is the work that it's about. It's all about sustainability or whatever. That's also an option too. Like kind of lean on those other types of resources that you're not so familiar with, like digital media. Um, yeah, just think outside the box, like we were talking about earlier. Awesome. Well, thank you, Nico, so much for this conversation. I'm just going to run through our little program schedule here. Next Saturday is campaign organizing, same time, same place. We're going to take all of the skills from session 1 through 3, the ocean climate connection, social media, and communications, and now finish with event planning and fundraising and put it all together for campaign organizing. I'm really excited for that conversation. And then, as you may know, we have a special session 5, which is a separate registration link. If you registered for the first 4 sessions, you will need to register separately for session 5 if you do want to participate. And you can go and find that on the World Ocean Day website, or if you can't find it anywhere, again, you can email me. That is, excuse me, designed specifically for youth who are associated with a zoo, aquarium, or museum, whether you're a volunteer, an intern, you did some sort of youth program with them, whatever. It's all about applying these skills within these specific types of trusted community institutions. So, if you're interested, definitely feel free to register for that as well. That will be not next Saturday, but the Saturday after. And with that said, again, all of the recordings will be up on the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. After next week, we will be sending out our feedback survey. And then again, here is my email, ljohnson@theoceanproject.org. If you do have any additional questions about anything that we talked about today or anything else related to youth advocacy and this program, World Ocean Day, etc. But yeah, Nico, thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday. This was an awesome conversation. Really enjoyed talking with you and getting to connect, and just grateful for your flexibility to join us on a Saturday.
Of course, I appreciate you, Laura, and I appreciate, I'm honestly like really flattered and grateful to be able to like spend some time with y'all. And I'm so excited for all the things you're going to accomplish. I feel very, it feels cliche, but I feel very excited for, all of like the cool things you're going to bring into this world. So I'm just very happy to be here.
Yeah, well, awesome, everybody. Thank you so much. Hope to see you next week and have a great rest of your weekend, everybody. Bye.